You ate this animal. Maybe this week, maybe today, without looking at it. There are about 33 billion of them alive right now. 4 for every human on Earth. And the bird on your plate did not exist 100 years ago. Not this one. So what exactly did we make? And why is it the thing most likely to outlast us? That number is not a guess. The Food and Agriculture Organization counted them. In 2020, more than 33 billion chickens alive at the same time. 46% of them in Asia. Divide that against the human population, and you land on roughly 4 birds for every one of us. Right now, standing in sheds and yards on every continent people live on. No wild bird is anywhere close. Nothing is. The most numerous bird on Earth is a farm animal. And we know the figure because somebody counts them the way you'd count stock in a warehouse, which is what they are. But the count is the least interesting thing here. The age is worse. Nobody found this animal, we assembled it. Recently, deliberately, out of 3 pieces that have nothing to do with one another. A rice field, a grave, and a beauty contest in Delaware. Start with the rice field. The chicken is younger than the Great Pyramid. When the last stone went onto Giza, there was no such creature anywhere on Earth. The oldest bones we can point at and call a domestic chicken without an argument breaking out come from central Thailand, a site called Ban Nan Wat, about 3,500 years old, 1650 to 1250 BC, Bronze Age, late. That date is new. A team went back through the remains from more than 600 sites in 89 countries and threw most of the old evidence out. Bones misidentified, often as pheasant. Bones that had sunk down into layers older than the birds they came from. Whatever picture you carry of the first chicken, a pen, a hut, a farmer shutting a door, get rid of it. The bird arrived before the farmer did. The trigger was farming, but not in the way you'd guess. People started growing dry rice and millet. The fields and the scrubby ground around the fields happened to be exactly what a red jungle fowl wants. So the bird walked down out of the forest and moved in beside us. Nobody went and got it. Even the FAO still says more than 8,000 years on its own website. Somebody should tell the website. And there's one more thing about those first chickens. For centuries, nobody ate them. The earliest chickens in Iron Age Europe don't turn up where food turns up. They turn up whole, unbutchered. No cut marks, no cracked bones for marrow, no sign of a knife anywhere on them. Buried complete, on their own, in the ground, and often buried with people. Men laid down with roosters, women with hens. In one Czech grave, a full-grown cockerel, radiocarbon dated to somewhere in the 5th or 4th century BC, put into the earth like a person. Picture that for a moment, a man in the ground, and laid in beside him, carefully, a rooster nobody was ever going to eat. These birds were rare, foreign, carried a very long way, and whatever they meant to the people burying them, it had nothing to do with dinner. Which kills the story you've been carrying around without ever being taught it. That somebody, somewhere, looked at a jungle fowl and thought, "That's a lot of meat, I'll have that." Nobody thought that for 1,000 years. The chicken arrived as an exotic thing, a status object with feathers. The Romans are the ones who turn it into food. They move the birds around the empire. They make an industry out of the eggs. They get people used to the idea that this thing is lunch. And even then it moves slowly. In Britain, chickens aren't regularly eaten until the 3rd century. and mostly in the towns and around the army. Naomi Sykes, the archaeologist at Exeter who worked on all this, put it in a single line. Eating chickens is so common that people think we have never not eaten them. We have. Then it was food. And then, in 1948, it became a design problem. Here is how you build an animal. In 1946, an American grocery chain and the United States Department of Agriculture announced a competition. They called it the Chicken of Tomorrow. The pitch was ordinary and at the time not remotely sinister. Chicken was expensive. The country wanted a bird with more meat on it, and nobody had ever sat down and asked, in an organized way, what the best possible chicken would even look like. So they ran heats. Breeders across the country sent in hatching eggs. The eggs went to one site, hatched together, and were raised under standardized conditions. Same feed, same housing, same start. Because the only thing being tested was the bird. The national final ran in 1948 at the Agricultural Experiment Station in Georgetown, Delaware. 40 finalists, 25 states. The judging was specific and cold. How fast did it grow? How much meat came off the frame? How much feed did it take to put on a pound of that meat? How was it shaped across the breast, through the thigh, down the back? All of it scored. The prize was for the best carcass, which is a strange thing to win and a stranger thing to enter. That is the part people skip. A competition sounds harmless, but to run one, somebody has to write down what better means. And once better is written down, it can be selected for, year after year, by anybody with a barn and a pencil. A grower from California named Charles Vantris took the prize, with a cross. A Cornish rooster onto a New Hampshire hen. Cornish for the body, New Hampshire for the growth. And that is the moment the door quietly shuts behind the farmer. A hybrid like that doesn't breed true. Cross the winner with itself, and the next generation comes apart. The traits scatter, the birds go back to being ordinary. So you cannot make your own. You go to the company that holds the parent lines, and you buy the chicks. Every flock, forever. Most of the broiler lines alive on this planet today come down from that contest. The winners kept winning, the crosses kept getting refined, and the recipe stayed inside the companies that owned it. A competition to find the best chicken ended up producing the only chicken. And here is the objection you're already halfway to making. Maybe they just feed them more. Fair enough. And somebody went and tested exactly what you're thinking, and the way they tested it is the whole point. The University of Alberta had kept 2 old lines of meat chicken alive and untouched. One not selected for anything since 1957. One not selected for anything since 1978. Living fossils in a barn. In 2005, researchers raced those 2 against a modern commercial broiler, the Ross 308. 180 chicks of each line, 4 pens each, same building, same density, same lights. Stand in that barn for a second. 3 kinds of bird, the same age, under the same lights. And all 3 lines were fed the same food. Not the old ration for the old birds, the modern one, formulated to the modern bird specification, in 3 stages: starter, grower, finisher. And as much of it as any of them cared to eat. The food was identical. The animal wasn't. At 42 days, the 1957 bird weighed 586 grams, a little over half a kilo. The 1978 bird, same barn, same feed, came in at 1,205 grams. Here is the paper's own account of the half-century between 1957 and 2005. Growth increased by more than 400%, and the feed needed for every kilogram of bird was cut roughly in half, compounding at a bit over 3% a year, every year for 50 years. Same feed, same shed, two animals separated by 21 years, and you could see the difference from the doorway. So we build something. The question is whether it leaves a mark. A team of scientists has argued that it does, and that the mark is enormous. Their case is that the modern broiler is measurably a different creature from any chicken that existed before about 1950. The skeleton is different. The genetics are different. Even the chemistry inside the bone is different because of what it's fed. Set one down next to a jungle fowl, and you would struggle to call them the same animal. And that new shape appeared in a few decades. In geological time, that is a flash. By one estimate, the birds we breed now outweigh every wild bird on the planet, roughly 3 to 1. Then think about where the bodies go. You will never see one of those pits, and it makes no difference at all. Killed young in enormous numbers everywhere at once. And the bones go into landfill and farm pits and dumps, sealed under compacted rubbish on every continent in the same thin slice of time. A single global layer of an animal that never existed before and that couldn't last a season without us. Those scientists argue it could be the marker of a proposed epoch, the Anthropocene. Except the Anthropocene isn't official. In March of 2024, the geologists voted it down, 12 to 6. The governing bodies signed off on the rejection later the same month. The golden spike they'd proposed was a lake bed in Ontario, holding the plutonium fallout from 1952. It is not the boundary of anything. Formally, we're still in the Holocene. But look at what that vote was about. Where to draw a line, what to call the ground on either side of it. It was an argument over a chart. None of it touches the bird. The bones are in the ground either way. 3 things had to happen. A rice field in Southeast Asia, 3,500 years ago, quietly growing the exact habitat a nervous forest bird would wander into on its own. A grave in Iron Age Europe, with a rooster laid in beside somebody who had no intention of ever eating him. And a room in Georgetown, Delaware in 1948, where 40 birds were weighed and opened and scored, and a winner was picked. And the shape of every chicken to come was settled by a panel of judges with clipboards. An accident, a sacred object, and a product. 70 years of selection did the rest. You probably assume the mark we leave is the concrete, the steel, the satellites, the plastic, the glass towers you can see from where you're sitting. The layer isn't concrete, it's bone. Billions of nearly identical skeletons from an animal we drew up ourselves, going into the ground on every landmass we occupy, all in the same geological instant. A thin, bright line, a few centimeters thick, running through the rock beneath everything we ever poured. Nothing about that layer is an accident, and nothing about it is going anywhere. Rock keeps what it's given. Everything you have ever built comes down. The glass falls, the steel rusts through, the concrete cracks and washes to sea. The bones stay. Whatever digs that line up won't learn your name or mine. It'll learn what we were building, and that it was everywhere.